Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. This is Laurie Smith. Welcome to Blog Talk Radio. It is 9:30 p.m. here in Calgary, Alberta, and Wednesday night, November the 3rd. This is Child Abuse Prevention and Human Rights Abuse Prevention is up to us. 30-minute live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room is open, and I popped the link in there to what I wanted to talk about tonight. And I wanted to finish looking at this article that I found on a website here that we were talking about Monday night, all dealing with taking a stand against family violence. And I think it's just a all-inclusive article really about domestic violence, family violence, teen dating violence, child abuse, just the whole thing. Very good information, and it's to the point, and I just think it's really worth looking at. So that's what we're going to continue talking about here tonight. And so, I'm not a professional of any kind. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own blog talk shows. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, a volunteer position, which I love doing. And really, I just wanted to be one more voice, talking about the whole issues surrounding child abuse, human rights abuses. We all have rights. We all have human rights. Children have rights. We all have rights. And if we don't stand up and protect those rights, then we won't be allowed to keep them. And a lot of people have died, for these rights, to secure these rights for children and around the world. And so many countries, have signed the treaty, but some haven't. But they're still working on it. It's still something very much in the progress. It's a work in progress, and so much needs to be done because we see the headlines rolling out. We see what's happening out there regarding the situation with children being abused and killed at the hands of their parents and caregivers and other, crazy people, child sexual predators and whatnot, people who just get a hold of children and kill them. So children are being killed, their lives are being lost, and these children are irreplaceable. This is one child is too many. So, this whole idea of losing 5 children every day because to at the hands of their parents and caregivers is just ridiculous. But there's more. It's just that we don't often hear about them. There's at least 5, if not more, children that are killed and murdered every day in the United States at the hands of their parents and caregivers. This article actually comes from a Canadian website, but I just think the information there is very good, and they have some power and control wheels, as well as some equality wheels for domestic violence and abuse, right? And they have abuse of children wheel, and this is kind of where we left off on Monday night. So this is where I wanted to pick up. So my show is very sensitive, and I talk about everything to do with abuse, and abuse is a sensitive topic. And if you think the show might bother you, you just turn the show off, and you would not be hurting my feelings at all. And if you're a young person under the age of 18, I just ask that you have an adult listen to the show with you, because I'm all about protecting children. Children have the right to be protected at all times, and you should, if you're going to be in a chat room situation, you really need to know how to protect yourself. If you're a young person under the age of 18, just find out how to keep yourself safe while you're online. And you can find out by just typing into your browser, internet safety, online safety for children, things like this, and it'll bring up great information on websites that talk about how to keep yourself safe when you're online, how to keep yourself safe in chat rooms, and you really should get that information if you don't already have it, and make sure that you do that, and make sure you have permission to listen to my shows, because there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and I just think children and young people should be protected at all times, right? So we'll get right into this here, and we left off with looking at the whole issue of family violence, domestic violence, and I scrolled down, and there's a whole section on teen violence, which I didn't want to cover tonight, but there's an abuse of children wheel, and they have here, I'm just going to read through some of this. The violence, it's abuse of children. It's committing incest, sexual touching, kissing, sexualizing children's behavior, right? Punching, hitting, kicking, pushing, twisting of arms, choking, all of this, physical violence towards children. There's using instructions, isolation, emotional abuse, economic abuse, threats, using adult privilege, and intimidation. And that's all on this abuse of children wheel. And they go on to talk about the what each one of those represents in that wheel. And so you can check that out. It's those wheels are really interesting. You can find them on different websites. But if you look at power and control wheel, if you type into your browser abuse wheels, power and control wheel, child abuse wheel, it'll bring up the wheels, and you can actually see them. And if you look at the link here, you can actually see them on this actual website here. So I'll give you the information of where this website comes from, first of all. And we were looking at it Monday night. It's from the National Defence and the Canadian Forces, and that's from www.vcds.forces.gc.ca. And it's called Take a Stand Against Family Violence Fact Sheets. This is where I found this. It's from October 2007, and you can get the PDF version as well. And it's not all that old information. It's getting older, but it's just good information about violence, and you can make a different fact sheets. And this is really I just think this information is just awesome, just excellent. And they talk about what is family violence, all the different types of abuse, and we did go over that. The power and control wheel. Physical violence, sexual violence, using emotional abuse, using isolation, minimizing, denying, and blaming, using children. This is all to do with domestic violence and abuse and family violence, right? And then when you scroll down there, you can see there's all kinds of information on there about teen dating violence. Is your partner abusing you? What to do if you are in an abusive relationship? All that stuff, right? We went over most of that on Monday night. And so I wanted to take a look at this next portion, which was the abuse of children and what they had to say about that. So they said violence, abuse of children, using instruction, which is threatening punishment with, by God, courts, police, school, juvenile detention, foster homes, relatives, and psych wards. And that's threatening punishment with any of those things, telling children, we're going to punish you. God's going to punish you. The courts are going to punish you. Police, school, juvenile detention, foster homes, telling your children they're going to put them in a home, put them in a psych ward, things like this, right? Very damaging to children. Absolutely it is. That's a form of intimidation, really. Isolation, controlling, access to peers, adults, siblings, other parent or grandparents, and this happens a lot, and we know this. A lot of abusive parents obviously want to control who sees the child, because they don't want anybody to interfere with the way that they're treating that child, and they don't want anyone poking their nose in to see just how that child is if they are abusing that child. And because their abuse is all about control, right? That's mainly what it's about, controlling and issues, right? They want to control everywhere that child goes, who sees the child, and quite often to hurt the child and also to hurt the other people in the family. They will, not let other family members see the children. They'll keep them, isolated. They'll keep them away from the grandparents, away from other siblings, the other parent, which just happens all the time, and especially involving custody cases. And we see this. I know it's out there. It's going on all the time. It's absolutely horrible, horrific, and it's not a good situation for the children at all to be isolated like that, away from the other family members, especially when the other family members are not abusing the child, and they would be more help to that child. Then the children just suffer with the abuser, and all the other people are shut out. And we know that this happens, and it's very unfortunate. And really about the only way that you can prove that type of thing is you got to have documentation. I think any type of abuse situation going on, especially when there's children involved, you have to have all of the documentation, dates and times, what happened, when it happened, phone calls, every bit of contact that you might have had with the abuser or the potential abuser. It's all got to be documented, right? Because a lot of times abusive people will control the situation by controlling the children and where they go and who they see. And so it makes it hard for people to look in on those children to see whether or not they really are being abused or not. And I would say if you suspect abuse, make a phone call. That's just always what we always say. That's what everybody says on every website. And actually it's the law. If you know a child's being abused, you have to do the right thing and make the phone call because it's the law. And second of all, because you should care whether that child lives or dies and actually is not being abused sexually or in any other way, emotionally, verbally, psychologically, physically, right? It's all wrong. It all hurts. And also because if you suspect a child's being abused, then you have to do the right thing and make a phone call. because you could save a child's life by doing that, right? It's so important. Emotional abuse is another issue. Put down, name calling, using children as confidants, right? Using children to get to or give information to other parents, the go-between, right? Or getting information from the children about the other parent. They're just using them for information purposes, right? Being inconsistent, shaming children, that's all forms of emotional abuse. And horrible, the effects of emotional abuse on children. All you have to do is type into your browser effects of emotional abuse on children, and it'll come up, it'll bring up all kinds of websites talking about what emotional abuse does to children, and what we all know how hard it is on adults, so you can imagine how hard it is on children. It's horrible, and so many people do emotionally abuse their children at some point. Economic abuse, withholding basic needs, using money to control behavior, squandering family money, withholding child support, that's economic abuse. And lots of people withhold child support. And I know this for a fact, and it's horrible. Because who pays the price? The child does, every time. And the other parent is probably having a hard time too, but the child will ultimately pay the price for it because they won't have their needs met. Using children for an economic bargaining chip in the divorce, right? People are just really bad. They do what they do. It's incredibly wrong, but unfortunately, until people change their behavior and stop being abusive, which is, it's really up to them. They need to stop being abusive. This stuff is just going to continue on. It's absolutely horrible. There's threats, threatening abandonment, suicide, physical confinement, or harm to loved ones. Lots of times parents will threaten their children. Threaten to abandon them. They'll say, "Well, I'll leave you if you don't behave yourself," or your father will leave us if you don't change your behavior, or we'll leave you. I actually went to junior high with a young boy who went home from school one day, and when he went home, he went to go in the house, and there was nobody home. His family had completely moved and left him. He was left. I mean, they took the furniture, they took everything, and they did not take their son. And he was abandoned, completely abandoned. And I felt so bad for him, Absolutely horrible situation, The parents will threaten suicide. Believe it or not, I know that firsthand. Both my parents used to threaten suicide, and they used to. Well, my dad used to attempt it, but my mom used to threaten suicide quite a bit. And because she was stressed out, so she would say things like, "Well, it's all your fault, and I should just kill myself," or things like this, right? Or if you weren't such a bad kid, I wouldn't have to be feeling this way, and I wouldn't have to be thinking about killing myself, blaming me and being suicidal, right? There's suicidal thoughts and tendencies, right? Physical confinement, parents will often threaten to confine a child. They'll say, I'll lock you in the closet, or these are threats, right? Or I'll lock you in the basement, or you'll be stuck in your room for 3 months, or just threatening all the time, right? They'll threaten to harm loved ones or pets even. They don't say that here, but it's true. They'll threaten to hurt other people in the family, and especially if there's abuse going on, they'll say, especially child sexual abuse. This is a fact. Many times, parents will, or anyone who abuses a child sexually will threaten the child and say, if you tell anyone what happened here, then I'll hurt your parents, or I'll hurt your mother, or I'll hurt your father, or I'll hurt the siblings, right? Or I'll hurt the pets. It's just another way to control the situation, threatening the children, right? It's absolutely horrible. Using adult privilege, treating children as servants, punishing, bossing, and always winning, denying input in custody and visitation decisions, and interrupting children, right? That's using the adult privilege. And, adults have to be in control. They cannot let the children run the family, that's for sure. But treating children as servants is not the way to go about it. I think that children need to learn responsibility within the home. And I think that, in order to do that, you have to give them some responsibilities and expect that they're going to do them. But it shouldn't be stuff that they can't do, so that they fail, and then of course then you can lash out at them because of that, and it should be something that's appropriate for their age level. And really what it should be is kind of like, can you help me? Let's work as a team sort of thing. Instead of treating your children as servants, it's like the parents should say, hey, we're a family. We have to work as a team. You do this and I'll do this. And, maybe next week you can switch off and do something else. And we'll take turns, and we'll be like the most awesome team in the whole world. And instead of like trying to build their children up to be involved with the family and stuff, that treat them as servants. I actually knew kids who grew up like that. Their parents treated them like servants, and they were expected to clean like the whole entire house, or they couldn't come out. And like they had a whole list of stuff that they had to do, and if they didn't get it done, they were not allowed to come out and play, and they were just treated as servants, right? And we're not talking take the trash out, or we're talking like the whole thing, cleaning the whole entire house. Like that's just absolutely too much to put on a child, and I think that's just ridiculous. Get a house cleaner or a housekeeper if you want somebody to clean your whole house. I mean, or do it yourself. But children, they do need to learn responsibilities, and so you have to instill that in them, but not treat them like servants. And punishing, bossing, always winning, that's not the way to be as a parent. You have to be the boss, and you do have to be in charge, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's not good to go the other way with the children and just be their best friend all the time, and they won't learn anything that way. What they really need is someone to be in charge, but who will listen to them and who will sit down and consider their thoughts and consider what's going on with the child, instead of just being bossy and punishing when the child is not doing exactly what they want them to do, and always winning, always being the one to win everything. There's just some people that are just naturally like that. They just have to win all the time. And if parents do that to their children, the children will it sort of can set up a little bit of a low self-esteem issue. You got to let your children win sometimes. Denying input in custody and visitation decisions, I don't know anything about that myself because I didn't go through that, but I know how hard that must be on other people, where the one parent won't let the children see the other parent. Now, I know lots of people go through this all the time, and I see lots of stuff out there on it, and it's got to be extremely hard on the parents and the children, right? Because the children, if they love their mom or dad or whoever they're being kept from, and there was no abuse, it's just a custody issue, and then the other parent doesn't let them see that parent, then the child suffers for that because they really wanted to see their parent. And if there was abuse or something, then that's a different story. But if it wasn't due to abuse and the other parent is just being abusive themselves, then that's wrong. Interrupting, that's another way that adults will use their adult privilege and interrupt their children all the time and not allow their children to speak, and interrupting them and just cutting them off and not letting them ever get a word out. And I think sometimes, sometimes at some point it might be necessary, but I think, I think children, that's how children learn how to cope with things and how to talk things through, how to talk things out. They have to learn somehow, and you have to let them learn how to do that. So I think it's important to let children speak, and then, if you can, and let them have their say, and then sit down and talk about it. And they shouldn't always get their way, but they should be allowed to be heard. Right? That's the thing. Intimidation is another one. Instilling fear through looks, actions, gestures, property destruction, using adult size, yelling, being violent to the other parent, pets, etc. Intimidation, and that's just a horrible way to treat children. Just having just always this fear, instilling fear just because of the way you look at them, or a parent might look at their child a certain way and it just instills fear in the child. Actions, gestures, like my mom was always backhanding me, so every time she didn't like something that I said, she would pull up her arm like a backhand thing, and immediately I would shut up because I knew that if I didn't shut up, then she would follow through with it. But that was just her gesture, that was her action, and so she was always doing that. That was just the way she was, and so it was very, very hard. It was kind of, you're always a bit of afraid, like, that, you could be hit, you could be, and she quite often followed through with it. So I knew that she was serious. Through looks, just looking and gazing at children, causing them fear. That's just so wrong, and it's just sad that parents do that to their children. But that's abuse. I hope everybody knows. All of this stuff is abuse. Yelling. Now, I admit, sometimes, a parent might have to yell at their child, but not to the extent where they're just yelling at them to be abusive. You know what I mean? Especially a child who is older, a teen who might be in a rebellious stage. Yelling getting into yelling matches, I mean, it's easy to do because it's so frustrating because of the things that sometimes that teens will do. But yelling actually doesn't get anybody anywhere. It doesn't solve the problem. It does allow people to blow off a little bit of steam, but yelling doesn't solve anything. Sitting down and saying, okay, let's figure this out. But if you have a teen who won't do that, you know, that you have to find other ways to work through it. But I think you still have to remember that you're the adult in a situation. You're the one who is ultimately responsible for making it happen. And so by yelling and hurting your children is just not the way to go about doing it. Being violent to other parent or pets, etc., that's very much, you know, through using intimidation, you know, being violent to the other parent and pets, etc., that's very hard on children to be around violent people in the home, and a violent parent, you know, who is just violent towards the pets, violent towards everybody, violent towards possibly the siblings or the parent or whoever. It's really hard to be around that. Absolutely it is. And it just, what it does is teaches them to be violent a lot of times, and not just boys but girls too. If that's what they see and that's what they witness, that's how they feel that they learn that when you're angry or upset at someone, that all you have to do is be violent to get your way, you know. And so they will sometimes take that on, not always, but sometimes, and it's not good at all. It's a horrible way to bring up your children, and it's abuse. I hope everybody knows. Love and care for your children. And this is the Nurturing Children Wheel, and I like this one. This is so awesome. This one is encourage and support your children, give affection, care for yourself, right? If you care for yourself, your children will learn to care for themselves. That's the whole thing. Parents that don't care for themselves aren't setting a good example for their children, and their children then don't know how to care for themselves, right? And it's a big issue, and people wouldn't think it's such a big issue, but it's something that ran in my family, and so I completely understand that. It's really hard for me to take care of myself. People would think, well, why would it be that hard? But if you're not shown how to do that, and you're shown how to not take care of yourself, taking care of yourself seems like a really hard thing to do. It's very, very difficult, right? It doesn't come naturally to me, right? I mean, I could let things go and you know, walk around with an injury for, you know, years and years and years, walking around in pain just because I'm used to it, and I don't want, you know, that's what I grew up with it. I grew up that way. I grew up watching my parents be like that, and so, you know, you don't know how to care for yourself. So parents need to care for themselves too. It's not always just care about the children and don't care about you. My parents didn't care about us. They didn't care about themselves either. But that wasn't the case. But a lot of times parents they'll put all this care and stuff into their children, and then they won't care for themselves, and they're not setting a good example for their children. Parents have to care for themselves too. Yes, they do. Trust and respect, you know, there's the whole trust and respect for nurturing your children. Promote emotional security, you know. Provide physical security, you know, make them feel safe, right? Even in this unsafe world of ours, just making them feel safe because they know that they're loved, they know that they're wanted, they know that that you're happy they're there. You know, I can't imagine what it's like to grow up like that. Like I'm the opposite of this wheel. Like I don't know what that would be like to grow up in a home where you were wanted and loved, and everybody was just happy that you were there, and it was great. You know, I can't imagine what that would be like to be a child in that situation, because I never was. But it makes me happy to see this, because it's something that I longed for. It's something that I still, part of me, my inner child still longs for that, right? Provide discipline, which is important, because children, you know, discipline is not abuse. You know, there's a difference between discipline and abuse. That's the whole issue, is most people don't realize that. Some people think that discipline, any kind of discipline is abuse, and it's not. And some people think that abuse is discipline, and it's not. Right? They're two totally different things. Discipline is necessary, you know, for kids need to learn, and they do need direction. I call it direction. I like to call it direction better than discipline, because I don't like the word discipline. But I like the word direction, because kids they do need direction, or they will be all over the place, and you will not be able to control them. And then, you know, there's a whole issue of, okay, how do I control my child? They're out of control. Well, what kind of direction were you giving them as a parent? You know, it's like they need direction. They do need help. I like to call it help and direction. It's more positive than discipline. The word discipline bothers me because it's too closely related to, you know, I'm going to have to discipline you, which meant, you know, I'm going to bash your head in or whatever, because in my house, discipline was abuse, right? So The whole issue is for most people that's not the case, but I like to think of it more like direction and help, right? Help, kids need help, and they do need to learn. They need to be taught, and they can't do it on their own, and so they need parents to provide this, set limits, set boundaries, set these regulations and these things that are expected of them, as being part of this family. Everybody, I think that's great when families will come together and they'll say, look, we all have our part to play in this family. We're all very much just as important as the next one, all of us matter the same, but we all have a job to do. And we these are the rules. This is the boundaries, you know what I mean? But not be so rigid that when your kids get older that you just don't ever let them do anything. I mean, that's not a good way to bring up children, I don't think. But, just providing some good basic, ground rules, basic stuff that helps the family move, get along and everything's good, everybody's copacetic, give time. That's another one. I think a lot of parents just have a hard time with that because they're working 2 jobs trying to maintain the house payment and the car payment and everything else. I think a lot of parents would love to give time to their children and just can't because they're just so exhausted by the time they finish their 2 jobs. I know a lot of parents who work 2 jobs each to support their children and their family, and it's like, you think about, well, what kind of time do they have for their children? Probably not much. But then again, they're trying to make ends meet and they're trying to do it, and that's hard. Very, very hard. But I think as long as as the children know that you do care about what they're doing in their school activities or special events, or just including them in on things that, to help you get through the day, just letting them know that they are an important part of the family and that you do love them and care for them and that they're really the best thing that ever happened to you, they will come out all right. You know what I mean? And encourage and support, give affection, right? That's something that I just don't know a whole lot about. We were not given any affection in my home. There was just no such thing as affection, it just didn't happen. My parents were not affectionate with each other, and they were not affectionate with their children. So I have a hard time with affection. And so, somebody comes to hug me, I almost don't know how to handle it. It's like, and people think that I don't like them because I don't touch them. But see, I don't like to be touched, and so I don't touch other people. And so sometimes I try to remember to be a little bit more human and a little bit more, a little bit more nurturing in myself. I have to actually be conscious. It doesn't come naturally to me to be affectionate because I did not grow up like that, right? And that's very sad because a lot of people think I'm kind of standoffish and rude, but actually it's just something I never really learned how to do and don't really, haven't quite got a handle on it. And I'm learning, and as I get older, it's coming a little bit more naturally to me, but it's still difficult for even for me to come up and just put my hand on somebody, because I get nervous when people do that to me, right? And it's just from being battered for so long as a child, right? That's what happens, right? So and we weren't used to hugs. Nobody was hugging anybody in my home. So, if somebody would come to hug me, I would push them away because that's what my mom would do, right? My mom would push me away if I went to hug her because I was often scared. So I would run to hug her legs, basically is what I was doing, and she would push me away and tell me to get out of the house or whatever, right? So I just learned to not hug people, and I didn't like people hugging me, and I also didn't like people touching me, right? I had a bit of a problem with that. So love and care for your children, nurturing children. Promote emotional security, it says. Talk and act so that children feel safe and comfortable expressing themselves. Be gentle, be dependable. Provide physical security. Provide food, shelter, clothing. Teach personal hygiene, nutrition. Monitor safety. Maintain a family routine. Attend to wounds. Give time, participate in your children's lives, activities, school, sports, special events. Include your children in your activities and reveal who you are to your children. And encourage and support. Be affirming. Encourage children to follow their interests. Let children disagree with you. Recognize improvement. Teach new skills. Let them make mistakes. Give affection. Express verbal and physical affection, and be affectionate when your children are physically and emotionally hurt, right? And there's more here. There's quite a bit more here regarding this whole thing. And I think what we'll do is we'll finish this off on Friday. We'll take a look at the rest of this on Friday night. So thanks, everybody, for being here. And my good friend Gypsy Witch in the chat room from Australia, thank you very much. I just love you so much. And, Thanks everybody for tuning in to all my shows. I really appreciate it, and I'll be back on tomorrow morning with One Child Abuse Survivor to another 6:00 a.m. And until then, take care. If you need something, get a hold of me on Blog Talk Radio or Facebook or whatnot, and if I can help you find any information or resources, I'll certainly try. And have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care.